You're listening to Lighthouse Conversations, brought to you by Lighthouse Haven, a spiritual home for your awakening soul. Lighthouse Conversations is a show where awakening souls gather to be inspired, connected, and enlightened. Spiritual spark plug and host Chelly Canales, that's me, will guide you through the twists and turns of your journey to a safe haven where you are finally free to live your best light. Each episode contains a conversation with a guest who has gone through a spiritual awakening, detailing their unique and life-changing experiences in an intimate and candid way. Although everyone's experience is as unique as they are, we all share one common thread. We're all seeking something. So, come join us on this journey and be prepared to leave with resources that will supercharge you into inspired action. Here's today's episode. Well, hello, awakening souls. How's everything going for you this week? It's been an interesting week. We're heading towards the holidays, and I'm feeling this joy of course, of the holiday season and the connection of the friends and family that I love so much. And also this reflection as to why didn't I get more done? But I feel like it's this gentle balance that we all work with as humans, and that's just part of life. I'm so excited to share this next episode with you. It's going to be a supersized episode. I don't know if you're used to finishing my episodes in one car ride to work in the morning. Why don't you plan for a round trip and maybe a little bit more? Get on the treadmill, put in your earbuds, because you're going to want to hear this. My friend Mike Liguori is an exceptional human being. I'm super proud to know him. I'm really happy to have gotten to learn about what he does. The way he shows up in the world is what I talk about a lot. This is how I want to show up in the world. This is how the people around me that I gravitate to most, this is how they're operating. It's about putting your values into the work that you do. It's about living that truth. In fact, his company is Live Your Truth Media. So you're going to hear all about that, but it's going to be this incredible journey from being in the military and then suddenly coming out of it, realizing, wow, I'm not that thing that I thought that I was all of these years. Suddenly I don't know what I am, and having to regroup, having to deal with issues of alcohol and drug abuse, and having to find a place where he can exist in the world as himself and not needing anything else but his connection to his source. And that shows up in really incredible ways as well. So I hope you'll take a moment and listen. And yeah, here's the show.
All right, go when you're ready.
Welcome, Michael Liguori. Let's do that again because I said it wrong. Welcome, Michael Liguori.
Hi, Chelly.
What's
thanks
up,
for
Mike?
Thanks for having me. How you doing?
I'm doing great. I'm so happy you're on the show. I've been really fascinated by your journey since
thank you.
we met a few months ago. I guess
Yes.
almost a year now.
Almost a year, yeah.
And it's been really great to kind of see the layers unravel, so I get to know more about you as I'm learning you're a storyteller with your work. You are an author, published twice now. You have a career in the military that you have learned and taken so much value from. And I just want to kind of go through this awakening journey with you. Where did it come from? Where did it start? When did you know that you were a person like this before, and now you are this man? How did you get from point A to point B?
Well, first off, thank you for all those comments. I'm going to probably just preface this whole conversation with saying that I had no clue who I was before the military. And like most 18-year-olds, you don't know what you're doing, right?
I would say yourself.
Yeah, right. I would say before the military, I wanted to figure out who I was, and I thought it was going to be a quick process. So part of the reason I joined the Marine Corps was because you join the Marines, you become this person because they train you to be a soldier. They train you to, fight, to kill. You are disciplined. You learn these core values of like honor, courage, and commitment. And it sounds like that I may be painting the Marine Corps to be just nothing but like violence. The thing about the Marine Corps is that it instilled these core values into me that made me who I am today. And so for me, when I went into the military, I was kind of like, great, I'm going to be a Marine. So this is the type of person that I'm going to be. And so after 4 years, 12 weeks in boot camp, 2 tours in Iraq, there was a lot of little experiences that I had. And in those experiences, I grew as a young man. I also grew as a person as well. I also kind of grew into spirituality and then regressed into no spirituality. And then, we'll cover this later today. I grew later. I've clearly defined myself later after the military, since 2006, which is about about 14 years. 14 years since I got out of the military as a young man, and there's a lot that happened in there. But I think in terms of, kind of who I was and who I am now, there's a lot to unpack there. So
It's a small question. Well, I kind of want to touch on that feeling of identifying with what you do. So the military is this type of, structure. You have to be this kind of soldier. And there's this sometimes, for me anyway, there's this identification with, if this is what I do, then this is what I am. And I learned over time that that's not necessarily the case. But the military especially, I think, has a very strong culture of, we all follow this. This is who we are. Did you find that that was restricting, or was it your way to your liberation to who you are now?
Sure. The thing about the military is that they remove individuality. And they do it in a manner where you start understanding what it means to be part of a team. So in the Marine Corps, I always refer to the Marine Corps as like the world's largest self-help organization. Ooh. Because there's uniformity across the board. All the women style their hair the exact same way. They're treated just like the men are. The vice versa, the men are treated just like the women. You're Marines. You're not man or woman. We in the military, believe it or not, they're one of the most progressive organizations when it comes to diversity in a lot of ways, because anybody can really join and be from any walk of life. And yes, they did have the don't ask, don't tell, and there was repealed, obviously. But if you look at it from like a racial diversity standpoint, there were people from all walks of life, all different cultures that I never got exposure to. And when you realize that it doesn't matter if they're from a different country, or they don't speak English as well as you, or you don't speak Spanish, or you don't speak their native language as well, it doesn't matter. You're all on the same team, and you're all brothers and sisters. And they do such a good job of cultivating that, right? They do such a good job of letting you know, like, it doesn't matter if he's different or she's different. What matters is you're both Marines. You're both serving the United States of America. And so, to kind of go back to kind of the sense of individuality, I learned very quickly that I was part of this like big, freaking machine. I was I was a cog in the wheel, but I loved being that cog in the wheel. And I had 30 to 40 different Marines serving next to me who I got to learn who they were, where they came from. And we were all part of the same organization. Most veterans struggle with the fact that when they get out of the military, including myself, that they struggle with the fact when they get out of the military that they don't really know who they are. You go in at such a young age and you're taught about this team first mentality, mission accomplished, then it's troop welfare. It's not about you, it's about everybody else. So when you get out of the military and you realize that it's not like that at all, that actually it is about you and you need to go get a job and you need to put the roof over your head and food on your plate, a lot of veterans struggle with that. And so for me, I struggled with that. I got out of the military and I was like, I'm a combat vet. I served 2 tours in Iraq. I had men and women serve alongside me in a motor transport unit. We drove all over the Al Anbar province where a majority of the fighting took place. And I had no idea who I was outside of that uniform.
Ooh, I can imagine that leaving when it's over and you go back into real life. It's almost like jumping into cold water. It's all of a sudden, I have to learn how to swim and this water is freezing. And what do I do? How did you cope with that? What were your mechanisms to deal with that and start to discover who you are again?
Right. Well, I didn't. So I would say at first when I came home, I moved back into my mom's house. And, my mom had said, you can live here as long as you want, but you got to go to school and you got to work. And thank God mom did that to me, because that did light a fire under me. It kept me motivated. What really happened to me though is that I jumped out of the military and into freshman year of college in 30 days. I packed all my stuff. Wow. Yeah. So I packed all my stuff from Camp Pendleton. I drove an 8-hour drive back to Northern California along Highway 5. Unpacked my stuff. Maybe 4 days after I had gotten out of the military, I went to a junior college, enrolled in my classes, and within 30 days, I'm on a school campus. I know nobody. All the kids I went to high school with have no clue where they went, right? And here I was at the time, a 22 going on 23-year-old guy who haven't been a civilian for 4 years. So now I'm in these classes. I'm trying to meet people. I have no idea how people behave. All of my experiences I ever had from a young man from the ages of 18 to 22 were in war, were surrounded around like really tight quarters with some of these guys that I have now become. It's beyond friendship. It's a brotherhood. It really is. Some of the women I've served with, I still talk to these people. And when I didn't have that. And so I started dabbling and getting involved into, drugs and alcohol, right? It started off with pot, and then it went into like drinking excessively. And then those became my two mainstays. And I think there was a part of me looking back at this when I was a freshman in college. I'm thinking like, oh, this is what freshmen do, right? Like I partied in the Marine Corps. Like we worked hard. We'd go out into the field. We'd do training exercises. You don't drink for 7-8 months in a war zone. And you come back and the first thing you do is you go to a bar and you get trashed, right? So when I'm a freshman in college, I'm thinking like, cool, I did this for 4 years. From 18 to 22, I get to do this for another 4 years, right? Because that's what everybody does in college. Well, I started getting caught up in some bad stuff, right? And at that point for me, I thought I was, I'm meeting people on the football team, like talking to girls, like doing all the things that you do in college. And then about the start of my sophomore year, I was walking home from campus and walking home from school and to my car, and my dad called me up and he said, hey, Mike, can you talk? Well, yeah, sure. You got a letter in today from the mail from the Marine Corps. Okay. Maybe I forgot to fill out some paperwork, right? Like you don't think anything bad at this point. Well, it turns out that when my dad opened the letter, he had read this letter that stated that I had been asked to get pre-screened to go back for a third tour to Iraq. Now, we'll go into this a little bit later in the show, but there was a part of me that thought if I ever went back to Iraq after 2 tours, that I was not going to come home. And if I did come home, I was going to be brought home in a casket with an American flag draped over me.
That was just like a gut feeling that
I just knew. I just knew. So when my dad read me that letter that I had been asked to go to Kansas City, Missouri, and I was going to get screened to get redeployed back to Iraq, Chelly, I will tell you right now, there have been some moments in my life where they were very difficult, incredibly dark, and through the peaks and valleys of life, I've been able to deal with it. That moment right there was one of the worst freaking moments of my life. Imagining getting this letter read to you by your dad,
right,
and having an emotional breakdown in campus. I dropped my backpack. I started crying. I was screaming from the tops of my lungs, like as if I had actually been shot. And I think the worst part about that whole entire thing was there was a couple hundred kids standing around me, all leaving to go to their cars at the same time I was. I have never felt so much shame or embarrassment in my life than I did on that day.
That's so hard to hear because that is nothing to be ashamed or embarrassed about.
Right.
And
well, you don't know that.
Yes,
right?
Our culture doesn't allow for it, or it's getting better now, but
Sure.
the tradition has been for such a long time. You're a man, you're a soldier. You don't display this kind of
If you're a Marine,
emotion.
you don't, it's always, the rhetoric has always been, you don't have feelings. You suck it the hell up. You charge on. It doesn't matter what gets thrown at you. You adjust fire. You course correct.
Mm-hmm.
But when you're 22 years old or 23 at the time, and you're a sophomore in college, and the first year seemed like it was going great, and you start seeing your peers all looking at you like you're some basket case. And mind you, this was in 2007. It's going to be 2020. That was
Right.
13 years ago.
Right.
Sometimes I'm still like bewildered at the fact that it happened that long ago, even though it feels like it was yesterday. And so I ran home, got in my car, like crying mess, and I go into my house, and the first thing I did was lock all my doors. I locked the back door, I locked the front door. I was pacing around my house.
What were you keeping out?
Great question. I think I was so afraid of getting taken Like they were just like, there was, and it was weird. It might be weird. I would probably say it's a little weird me saying this. I really thought at some point they were going to, the military, the government was going to come in and like pull me out of my house and force my ass to go down there.
Oof.
Right.
They don't do that, do they?
No. But of course, but I had a panic attack. I'm experiencing anxiety. I don't know what the hell anxiety is. And now I'm having this full blown thing. I feel like I have no control over my day or situation, what's happening. So I call my mom and I'm like, Mom, I don't know what to do. And she's like, whoa, slow down. What's going on here? And I say, I got a letter from the Marine Corps and they told me I have to go back. And my mom said, I'm coming home right now. She's working at this time. She came home probably about half an hour later. She held me and then she said, we will figure something out. Don't worry about this, but you need to go get help. And I said, no, I'm going to be fine. Everything's going to be okay. Totally fine. And I shrugged it off at first because I was like, I'm a Marine. I have to suck it up. I don't have to deal with this kind of crap. Like, I've dealt with worse. I've been shot at. I've had insurgents try to blow me up. Whatever I was experiencing cannot be that big of a deal, right?
Because it's hidden, it's invisible. It's not an active gun in your face. It's happening on the inside, and so it's harder to justify those feelings.
And so how do you know that? You don't, right? And I think for anybody that's going through that, the first time you ever experience panic, anxiety, depression of any sort, you have no idea what's going on with you until you go see somebody who knows what they're talking about.
It's uncharted territory, and thank goodness there are people who can hold that space for you.
Right. And so what happened was a couple days later, I was still feeling the after effects of it. Now, mind you, it wasn't as powerful. Like I still wasn't like having a panic attack or an emotional breakdown on my campus. But I was still feeling some sort of residual effect, like something wasn't right. And I went to the VA hospital. I told my mom I was going to go. I don't know how I got down there and still was able to like keep my crap together, right? And like focus on driving and like obeying all the stop signs. And I pulled into the VA parking lot and I remember walking into the emergency room. And this was the first time I knew that something was really clearly wrong with me. The moment I walked into the emergency room, I told the desk attendant, I said, she said, can I help you? And I said, I don't feel safe and I don't feel right. And I don't know like how I came about saying those words, but I need to talk to somebody. And she looked me dead in the eye, like pierced my soul pretty much, and was like, can you go sit down over there and just wait and we'll help you? And I was like, oh, okay, sure. Jelly. 2 seconds later, she picks up the phone. She looks right at me. I can see like she's talking on the phone. She hangs up the phone. And I would probably say within like a 10, 15 minute period, these two big dudes who look like they were like cut from NFL training camp escorted me to a room on the 5th floor and had me wait inside. The reason why I tell this story is because 13 years ago at the time, post-traumatic stress disorder, all of that stuff that was happening to military veterans, people didn't really know what it was. To this day, I think we have such a better understanding of it. But you want to talk about spirituality, you want to talk about discovering yourself, nothing will shake you more to the core than being a broken version of yourself, sitting in a doctor's office wondering, what in the hell are you going to do next?
And it's interesting that you say that because I actually did grow up knowing about PTSD. My dad was a social worker for veterans and had to work with them, counsel with them, learned so much, helped so many people in that regard. And it was something that always made sense to me. Of course, you're going to have after effects of things that are traumatic. That just makes sense. The fact that it hasn't really become as, common in the vocabulary until later is such an injustice to all the soldiers from all the previous wars who've never had that kind of awareness or care. So it's a step in the right direction, and it's not nearly enough, I'm sure, being done about it.
Well,
even
and I
to
think
this
it's
day.
and I will say it's gotten a lot better. I have people that I know that work at the VA, and they said that the understanding, the research that has come about with post-traumatic stress, and even some now it's more prevalent than it was before. They're floating this idea of post-traumatic growth, right? So people becoming stronger versions of themselves through traumatic situations. But, I'm a year out of the military and I'm sitting in this doctor's office. And I remember that 3 residents came into the office and they started asking me a crap load of questions. Are you having nightmares? Well, yeah, of course I'm having nightmares. And I didn't tell anybody this before the podcast, I should say in the beginning of the podcast. I was having the same nightmare 3 nights in a row for the entire year, every week. So 52 weeks, I was having the same nightmare 3 times a week.
What was it?
I was in a combat zone. I was fighting and I was getting hit and shot. And the dream was so real and vivid that I would wake up in a panic attack every night. Like I had felt like the bullets coming into my body, like the burning of it. Like I felt the heat off of it. That was the craziest, now thinking about it now, that was like so wild to even just fathom the fact that your brain can generate something like that wasn't real and make it seem like it was so real and vivid.
Have you been shot? I mean, no, you've been shot at, but did a bullet ever hit you?
No.
So you are imagining what it would feel like, but it feels so real at the time. It's interesting. I wonder if it's like when those things happen, if it's our brain saying, I'm going to put you in that situation just so that you can process what that is, to go through it as if you were there. And then maybe come out on the other side of it, like surviving it or having some positive outcome to it. Did that dream ever resolve for you?
That, it's funny because I would probably say later in life, years down the road, it definitely, that dream never happened again. But it was at the time when I'm answering these residents and I'm saying, yeah, I've been having nightmares. And they said, do you ever wake up in cold sweats? Yeah. And they said, do you feel like your life's in danger? And I say, oh yeah, all the time. And I'm answering these questions and it's kind of like a puzzle, right? Like it's one piece is going down, the other one's starting to connect to it. Then next thing you know, another piece is, and soon enough, you're starting to get a picture of what's happening. And when I started realizing I was answering these questions and they were kind of like shaking their head at me like, yeah, interesting. And I'm sitting there going like, what the hell is going on here? Like, what do you guys know? One of them got up and said, we'll be right back, Mr. Liguori, just go ahead and sit down. So I sit in there. You want to talk about like a wait? Like what it felt like to me, I was in there for 2 days, but it's probably like 15, 20 minutes, like in real time. One of the doctors comes back in and says, so we took we took our notes, we talked about it outside. And Mr. Liguori, have you ever heard of post-traumatic stress disorder? And I go, what the hell is that? And they said, well, it's do you ever drive a car? And I'm like, yeah, I've driven a car. And they said, do you know what a stick shift is? And I was like, yeah, I got, when I got my license for the first time, my dad made me buy a stick shift. Funny story.
Same.
My dad made me buy a stick shift. And I bought this 89 Accord that was like $2,000. And my dad made me drive it home from the dealership back to the house. Never had touched a stick shift before.
That's crazy. Was it a big highway or just
No, I was driving like street roads.
Yeah.
Well, because I was like scared out of my mind to like get on the freeway.
Never
and I was
done
like,
it.
I don't know how to go from first to second gear. Like, what the hell's a clutch, right? But anyway. So I remember him saying, it feels like that your car is just stuck in gear and you can't get out of it. And that's when I started realizing about fight or flights and fight or flight. That's when I started realizing about how your brain works and that your brain doesn't understand reality a lot of the times and that everything that goes on in our head is what we truly believe. So I would say the good news out of that diagnosis the day I have is I finally knew after a year of the panic attacks, the nightmares, thinking they were all just normal parts of like whatever my experiences were. I now knew what was wrong with me, but it was incurable. And to this day, there is no cure for post-traumatic stress. There are tools that you can use to minimize it. But people who have post-traumatic stress can come out of it and live very normal lives. They can live very empowered lives, but there is no cure for it. It doesn't go away. You can train your mind to box those memories and put it on its shelf, so to speak. But we can't ever get rid of it.
But you did touch on something important in terms of having terminology for what it is that you're experiencing. I bring up the example a lot of being an empath. That was something I learned that I was. And over time when I was young, why am I hurting so much? Why am I feeling other people's stuff? Why can't I release myself from the energy of this space? And when I finally learned what it was, suddenly it was manageable. And it gives you that awareness. So even though the PTSD is not curable, you have the right tools. to survive and have a great life like you do. I want to know how you got from that hospital room and your diagnosis to not having to go back to Iraq.
Yeah. So I didn't know at the time that when you have a diagnosis of PTSD, like, first of all, your world completely changes. It's very much like the world is a lot different now. There's an explanation why I'm waking up with cold sweats, why, I'm feeling weight on my shoulders or I'm heavy. And there's all these things and I'm a voracious reader. So I will still to this day, I try to read as much as I possibly can because I think it's just really fascinating to see what goes on in the world. I read everything I possibly could about PTSD. And I was reading stuff, opinion-based papers that was like, we should drop the D. It's creating a stigma and it's not a disorder. And people who have this, need to live quality lives. And I've heard some people where it's like, you have it, you're totally screwed. This is it. So I was reading all across the spectrum. When I found out I got that, I got put on these SRI, I think it's like, I forgot what they're called, but basically they're serotonin inhibitors. And the thing was, it was called citalopram. I think that's what it was. I might be saying it completely wrong, but anyway, citalopram. Yeah, that's what it was. Citalopram. That's what it was. So I was taking these pills. It was a very small diagnosis, but it's very small dosage. But once I started taking them, I almost felt like I was kind of like beyond normal. I was like on the other side of the spectrum. So I wasn't depressed or I wasn't like shook or by any reasons. I was very much like, I felt like I was cracked out. Like I had a permanent smile on my face the entire time. Right. So one, I had never felt that way, but it was kind of like, whoa, this is different. Right. Injection of serotonin, all the happy hormones, dopamine, all that stuff. Well, so first of all, life's feeling way great because now I'm taking these pills. It feels awesome. I'm not drinking or smoking pot as much as I was before prior to this. But I did find out that when you have this diagnosis of PTSD, they will not let you go back into the military because you have some sort of anxiety disorder. And I'll never forget this. I stood in line. I was the first one in line to go see this like chief medical officer in the Navy, who basically was the guy that said deny or next.
Yeah.
And so I was the first one in there and I'm like sweating freaking bullets. Like I am drenched and I am like praying to God. I'm like, please don't send me back. Please don't send me back. And I hand this gentleman my paper and he tells me to sit down and he looks through everything. And it's funny because I didn't realize at the time my medical folder from all the therapy that I had done. And remind you, this was like after I had found out my diagnosis, there was about a 3-month window where I would go and get seeing nurses and I was getting seen as like a psychotherapist. I was like psychiatrist. And I was getting like on the pills. I was like doing exercises, like all this crazy stuff. So I was like very intense therapy. And I didn't realize that my folder was like, thick. Probably about an inch and a half thick. I'm like, holy crap, man! I must have done a lot of work with me.
Where they use really big font.
Yeah, right. There's pictures. And so I remember he looked at this and he was all, yeah, you're not going back. And he stamped it. And there's like this big red stamp. So I tell this part of the story because when I got my folder, I felt like I had won the lotto. Yeah. I was like, I'm never going back again. This is great. Except the fact that I realized that I had to live the rest of my life with being seen as a, quote, broken veteran, a mental health risk, diagnosis. And now there was this stigma attached to everything that I did. So I was like, great. How do I explain this one now? So after that time in probably about the beginning of 2008, I would probably say if you were to break my life into chapters, that was chapter 2, was learning how to be a human being with a mental health diagnosis and trying to get a job, trying to figure out who you are. And at this point in time, when we talk about spirituality, I had no clue what I believed in anymore. I grew up Catholic. I grew up believing that God and Jesus Christ were like the real deal. And that's like what ruled the realm, so to speak. I would say a majority of us believe in God or a life force, one or another. Right. But for me, you're taught all of that. And then you go into something like war, not only once, but twice, and you pray to God every single day, but you're starting to weigh in your mind that if there is really truly a God, right? And this is something that no shit came from my experience. If there really is truly a God, why is that guy trying to shoot me?
These are the hard questions.
Well, but why is there so much, why is there this horror? Why is this why does he hate me? Why is this young kid throwing rocks at my truck? Why is there insurgents? Why is there evil in the world if we're all created out of the form of good? These were questions that I would probably say plagued me for a really long time. Even though I wasn't in the war zone, I'm starting to realize that maybe there isn't a God. Maybe there isn't anything at all. And that's when I would say round 2 of drugs and alcohol really kicked up for me. Drinking alone.
Yeah.
Smoking a lot of pot. And trust me, I live in Colorado and we smoke our fair share here. But this was to the point where I couldn't even feel like I could be a functioning member of society unless I had taken some rips off a joint.
And would you say that this was all to kind of transcend that feeling of being a body, like being here on this planet, just having that day to day, I don't know what the word is, the hardship of feeling like I have to exist here and I have to show up as myself every day and try to have a good life. So it felt like escapism, but you also had that pill that you were taking that put the smile on your face. Did they counteract each other? Did it wear off?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I would say the holy trinity was, citalopram, a nice bag of marijuana and, some beer. And that to me was, you were talking about trying to exist in the world. I would say it was not wanting to exist in the world.
Yeah.
And to me, I battled with that I would probably say for quite some time. There was a point where I woke up one morning and I realized this, and, for anybody out there that's thinking about doing this with, taking some sort of medication, my advice is please consult your physician before you do what I just am about to tell you. So I was on citalopram, which is, basically a generic form of Prozac. And I stopped taking them.
Just cold
flushed
turkey.
them down the toilet. Did not know you're supposed to do that.
Oof.
Well,
that you're not supposed to do that.
You are not supposed to do that, right? So team that up with heavy dose of cannabis, heavy dose of alcohol. You're trying to go to school and do your homework, which, by the way, I've never really been a great student, but at that time, those things weren't helping
you
me.
weren't getting anything
Anybody
done.
who thinks that they're high and then they can take a test really well, please let me know, because I tried that and I was terrible. But for me, I was oh, great, I don't need these pills anymore. I can just use cannabis. It's natural. It heals the earth. A lot of Bob Marley rhetoric was happening, right? And I flushed him down the toilet. And I remember 2 days later, I went into this really dark, depressive state. And it was worse than anything I've ever been into in my life. And I called my doctor and I said, I feel really super depressed. I don't know what's going on. To this day, I don't know where that inner strength came from for me to check in with my doctor or reach out to people and say, hey, something's not right with me. And, my doctor at the time was saying well, are the pills enough for you? And I said, well, I flushed them. And my doctor was don't ever do that again. I need to see you right now. So, being in the military, one of the things you learn really well is you learn how to take orders really well.
Yeah, I'm there.
Doesn't
Let's
matter
do
who it is.
Yeah.
Still to this day, I'm oh, okay, cool. And I'm wait a minute, why am I doing that? But I ended up driving down there and they had told me that when you cut yourself off medication like that, you don't wean yourself off, and you don't, I was taking stuff that was boosting dopamine and serotonin in my head, or there was at that point. So for me to do that unsupervised was not smart. Finally I leveled out and was leveled out, but in the back of my mind, when we were talking about spirituality, right? To me, I was drinking and using cannabis because of the simple fact is that I didn't want to deal with the fact that maybe there was no purpose to why I was still here. Like, why was I still alive? And some of my friends had committed suicide after the military.
Yeah.
Like, were in motorcycle accidents. We all came home safe. Yet I lost more of my friends after the military than I did in 2 tours in combat.
That's crazy.
I lost 5 friends within the
sorry.
first like 2-3 years. And thank you, and it's still to this day is like the wildest thing to me. But when we talk about like spirituality and how I came to be, for me, drugs and alcohol put me in such a dark place that I had driven myself to the verge of committing suicide. And I will never forget this. It was a day in December. It was a Wednesday, and I had chosen not to go to school at that time. Now, mind you, this is probably about, we're jumping all over a couple places, but I would probably say this is about 2008, 2009-ish kind of, or 10, probably 2009, 10. So for 2 years, I'm battling drugs and alcohol, and I'm keeping this entire journey to myself. And so at this point in time, I get to a really dark, depressive state, and I get to the point where it's like, I can't deal with this shit anymore. I'm in therapy. Somehow I'm going to therapy still, but I'm not telling my psychiatrist or my therapist at the time that I'm using drugs and alcohol. So I'm still going, still doing my thing.
But they're missing a huge piece of the puzzle.
Writing a freaking book still, by the way.
Yeah.
Like,
You'd already started.
I had started the Sandbox Stories of Human Spirit and War in 2008 after I had found out that I was not going back to Iraq.
Wow.
But the problem is that I'm still using drugs and alcohol. So I'm not writing in it from a clear space. I'm like writing, just journaling stuff. And it's very emotional. And every time I got emotional with that book, I'd started drinking and smoking. And 2 years into the book, in about 2010, I didn't want to be here on this earth anymore. And I went up to my kitchen, and I remember I pulled this drawer open, and there was this knife there, and it was a big freaking steak knife. I pulled the steak knife out, and I said, you know what? Make this quick. Yeah. And the moment I went to go and try to cut myself, the room got really dark. And I mean dark in a sense of like the sun had stopped, like shining into the kitchen. There was dead silence. And when I'm talking about silence, I'm talking about hearing a pin drop. And I started feeling cold. But then out of nowhere came this sense of warmth, almost like a blanket had been draped over me. And at this moment in time, I'm like frozen. So I'm holding this knife. I'm staring outside at my window. I can't really see the sun at this point. And out of nowhere, there's this voice in my right ear that says, put the knife down, Michael. Don't do this. Now, this voice I can only describe to you as a loving parent, a father. It was a male voice, and it was very bassy. It was almost kind of like Barry White bassy. Not like, not like how you doing, but
right,
it was smooth. It was like safe. And the voice kept repeating it to me, and I was still holding on to this knife for like freaking dear life. I would not let this fucker go. And the voice repeats, it says, it's not your time. You have a job that you have to do. But you need to put that knife down and walk away. And so I'm still frozen at this time. And I'm holding this knife, and I'm like shaking at this point. And the voice is like, please, come on, put the knife down. Put it down, son. And I let go of the knife, and I hit the floor. And out of nowhere, my knees buckled, and I collapsed to the ground. And for about 3 hours, Chelly, I was in the fetal position crying. And that was the moment that I had hit rock bottom in my life. Mm. It was also the moment that I had realized that whatever I had believed before with thinking God wasn't real, there was no life force, there was no energy or higher power, any of that shit. All of that stuff went out the window. And here I was in like this embrace of my kitchen floor, the kitchen I used to run around and steal cookies from my mom's cookie sheet when I was like 6, 7 years old. This is the place where I got fed my meals. And this was the place that we're at about 26, 27 years old, 10 years ago. I had come to terms with the fact that I didn't want to be here anymore, but something stopped me from doing that. During that time, I have a dog named Apollo that I saved from the pound when he was 60 months old. And Apollo came out of nowhere. I didn't know where he went at this time. And he came out of nowhere, and Apollo came right up to the side of me and laid right into me and cuddled with me. And after I had cried, I had realized that in my head that, holy crap. I don't say this ironically or when I use the word holy crap, but there's something out there. Maybe God is real. Maybe, just maybe, I was completely freaking wrong with everything that I thought of before. Maybe the drugs and the alcohol weren't the answer. The panic attacks, the broken relationships with women, the fucked up friendships of where I would anytime I would try to open up to somebody, I would shut them out completely. All of that stuff that I did maybe wasn't what I was supposed to live my life like. Maybe that wasn't life. Maybe all that I experienced led me to the moment of being on the floor in my kitchen, realizing that God had revealed himself to me, or it itself to me.
Wow.
So I went downstairs. I took all the cannabis I had, flushed it down the toilet. Took all the beer that I had in my fridge and gave it to my brother. And I told myself that I wasn't going to do it again. Drink, do drugs. And at that point in time, life started turning around a little bit. And, for anybody that's curious about being sober or what sobriety is like, your first 30 days, you are jonesing for beer. You are jonesing for any drug or vice.
It's the
that
habit,
you're into.
it's the comfort. It's
and you will dive into sugar. Let me tell you. I'll tell that story later. Okay. But anyway, so I got to the point where things were good, things were fine. But fast forward, I finished the book in 2012. My memoir got published with the publisher out in the Bay Area, Grizzly Peak Press, and I got a book deal right after college. And I went around and told my story, very similar to the story what I've told you before, how I came home, how I kind of found God, what war was really about, the tolls that it takes on men and women across the board, families, relationships, everything. So things were great, right? And on a whim and at the encouragement of an ex-girlfriend in 2000, probably 14, 13, at that time frame. It was a year after Hurricane Sandy had hit New York City. I moved to New York.
I was living there at that time too.
Yeah. We talked about that before. And I bought a one-way ticket, packed 2 of my sea bags, and I was about 29, 30 years old at the time. And I said, I'm tired of living my life, kind of the serpentine, right? Where you're back and forth, you're trying to figure shit out. And I said, what? I'm going to challenge myself. And that was the first moment in my life that I had really, truly challenged myself outside the military. I had played college football, checked that box, great. But to me, the real challenge was going to one of the world's toughest cities to really, truly make it, right? And I'm not quoting Jay-Z or Beyonce at this point, but I went there and I said, I'm going to try. And I, hit the pavement my first day and was handing out resumes of jobs. And, was really this is it. I'm in the concrete jungle. I am I'm hitting the pavement. I'm doing whatever I can. And it was the first time, I would say, after the military that it actually felt like I was truly discovering myself. It was when my spirituality got a little bit stronger, what the whole concept of faith really was. So not only do I have this book published, I'm making connections in New York. And, thing is that when you're out in New York and things are going really well, you're pretty much prone to drinking, right? So I started picking up drinking again.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking I don't have PTSD. There's no big deal. I don't have any war trauma crap that's happening. Well, I was pretty wrong because I was drinking a lot. And, you know, when you're in New York City, you don't think about it because that's what everybody does.
Everybody.
You work your ass off and you go out, you have a couple drinks on a Monday night happy hour, you go home, and then Tuesday you do it again. And then, you know, in the fall, you have Saturday, Sunday college football and NFL. You know, during the week, you have mixers and networking events. So I did that for 3 years. Now, mind you, the good news is I have a ton of people that I know in New York, great network, absolutely dynamic individuals. But again, now I have a drinking problem. I end up moving to Denver, and again, still drinking, still thinking nothing's wrong with me. And at this point in time, I started noticing that I was kind of going back into that dark place, the dark places. So not respecting my friends, not really giving a shit about anything, not really being mindful or intentional about stuff, experiencing anxiety and self-worth issues, and kind of like doing things out of my own self-interest. And I would probably say that after doing that for a couple years in Denver, and I'm skipping over some parts for brevity, but I woke up one morning about 2.5 years ago, and I was probably 25 pounds overweight. I didn't look good. I looked like literally I had just added weight to my face. Like I looked out of shape, but pizza boxes all in my apartment, like half smoked joints. I'm thinking that I'm having the time of my life and having fun when actually I was damaging myself.
Yeah.
And it was at this point in time when I realized that the voice came back again.
You're kidding.
Nope. Voice came back again and said, this is not what this is all about.
Barry White, why do you keep coming back at the right time?
Barry, why? And I don't know. Barry's been gone for a while, so maybe it was him.
Well, it might actually be him. You got lucky.
You know, everybody thinks Morgan Freeman's God. I would argue like Barry White could be it. But that voice came back again. And so, you know, while I had probably would say dabbled my toe into spirituality, so to speak, at this point in time, you know, I'm thinking life's great. I don't have any problems. I got a job. You know, I'm enjoying my dating life. You know, I have some friends here in Denver, but I'm not healthy. And actually, there's beer bottles and there's crap all over my apartment. And like, what the hell is going on here? So the voice says, this is not what it's supposed to be. Like, this is not what I have set out for you. And I'm paraphrasing here. But the moment I heard that voice and I felt this sense of unhappiness and this like depression that was plaguing me again, I started realizing that, like, you know what, Mike, you've been drinking for a really long time. And you've been on and off with this thing for a really long time. And you haven't been using drugs for enhancement or enlightenment. And listen, I'm not condoning, you know, drug use or alcohol use, but for someone like me, I was not using that stuff properly or responsibly. And so in 2017, in May, I quit drinking. And then I quit using cannabis in that manner. And so the first 30 days, my hands were shaking. And this is how I knew I was drinking a lot, Jelly, which was like my hands were shaking.
From withdrawal.
Oh, yeah. And I didn't realize it was that bad because I'm like, oh, yeah, I'll have like 3 or 4 margaritas. Like, I think I'm above average size human being. So I'm thinking like, oh, yeah, like instead of 1 ice cream cone, I'm going to have 2.
Sure.
Right? Instead of 1 pizza, I'm going to have 2 pizzas. But I remember when I stopped drinking, my hands were shaking. And it's crazy because like the withdrawals are really bad. And I'll never forget this. Like the first month I stopped drinking, I started getting these cravings. Like I would probably attribute them to very similar to what pregnant women get, where they just start wanting these like really crazy foods like peanut butter and pickles and all sorts. And I've heard stories from like my sister-in-law who just had her first kid. Aww. And I'm sitting there going like, you know what? I really want a milkshake. And so I'm in Denver. We have some really great ice cream spots. Well, I started hitting up Sweet Cow.
Yeah.
At first I'm like, milkshake, this is great. Quenches the thirst of the actual, like the sugar cravings I'm having. Cause you know, your body converts alcohol to sugar.
Absolutely.
Well, I start showing up again, and I start showing up again. And I realized that over the course of like probably 2 to 3 months in the summertime, I'm going to Sweet Cow 3 times a week. Not very flattering.
1,000 calories a pop.
Oh,
minimum.
easily. And I knew it was bad when one of the young girls behind the register went up to me and she said, "The usual?"
Yeah.
And I said, "The usual." Oh,
Welcome back, Mike.
Yeah. Like,
We've already got it started for you.
Right. Exactly. Loyalty card.
Yeah.
So anyway, outside of that kind of that funny moment dealing with like sugar cravings, I realized that the moment I gave up alcohol and I gave up cannabis use was the moment that I decided, or I would say that spirituality kind of deepened for me and got into a much more connected sense for who I am today. So, for me, like I have really doubled down mostly on the belief that, what happened those 2 times, the day I tried to commit suicide and the day I tried to, I quit drinking and quit alcohol abuse and just decided to become sober. Those were the 2 days that God made himself real to me.
You were in the darkest of dark nights of the soul. And sometimes I feel like everything is stripped away so that we can have that moment where we realize it is real, it is true, because otherwise we're not open to it or we can't access it. It sounds like a miracle to me. And I'm glad you're here. Glad that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Barry.
Yes.
Yes. Do you think that was like an angel or like just something? Like, how would you define what you think that presence was? You mentioned that it was a voice you could understand. They were speaking English. It was masculine. Like, what a guide? Like, just your imagination working to save you. Like, what is it that you could attribute that to? Not that we know the answers, but what do you think strongly?
Yeah. A piece of advice that I got from someone very close to me told me that it's not really important to know what that is. What it really matters is, do you think you know what it is? And what does your gut tell you?
Yeah.
So if you were to ask me, like, what was it really? I stopped asking myself that question because I
can't know.
Well,
really.
I mean, look, there's no manual to what we're doing here. There's no manual to life, right? Mm-hmm. Like, there's things that work and kind of work, and there's things that definitely don't work. And one of the things I know that doesn't work and ends up driving you completely mad is trying to figure out, what happens to those types of spiritual awakenings. It's probably the best thing you can do is just understand that you had one.
Yeah.
And for me, it could be my consciousness. It could be, it could be like the after effects of like, getting really stoned the night before and playing Rock Band until like 2 in the morning. It could be
all by yourself.
Oh yeah.
Were you the drums? Or
No, I was actually singer and guitar player. My brother would play drums.
Excellent.
Yeah, of
multitasking.
Course. Well, of course, right? And then you think everything that you're producing on Rock Band is like, a gold record. But when you're under the influence. But for me, I stopped asking myself then. I realized that, 2 times that voice has saved my ass. Mm-hmm. Why? I don't want to know. I just know that I have to give into that. So the art of surrender.
Huge.
Number one, I would say to probably a spiritual awakening, in my opinion, is surrender to the fact that you had it, understand that that's what it is, and move on. And just know that like part 2 is really focusing on the fact that like it is okay for you to question and want to know what you truly believe in. And most of us will spend our entire lives doing that.
Yeah.
But for me personally, I truly believe that was God. And not once, but twice. And every time that I have asked myself, was that really God? The answer's been an immediate yes.
Always yes.
I'm a human being, and there's times where I'm going to question decisions I've already made, like 10 years ago. I'll be like, God's real. And then like 10 years later, I'm like, well, I'm not sure. And it's like, no, I'm here. God has always made himself present in my life in some form. It could be like a sign. It could be some sort of manifestation. It could be through the form of like receiving money from the universe. It could be from almost anything. And it's all from the form of questioning, right? And I don't do it to like entice it, right? And be like, oh, maybe if I start questioning, I'll get what I want. It's more of the fact is that I, from time to time, want to deepen my spiritual connection. And so I really truly think that's what it is. For all of you out there that are into spirituality, we do know that we have guides, and in parts of our lives, in different chapters where we are, there is a set of guides or people that will be in your life at the point in time and where you're there. So for me, one crazy story I'll tell you real quick. So my aunt is a clairvoyant. We are not blood related, but this is a woman that I grew up with. And this is part of the influence of my spiritual practice and belief that I have today. And so I was getting a reading one time from her, and my aunt told me that there was a gentleman in the room. Now, I'm going to tell you guys a little bit about this. So a couple years after I got out of the military, I had a friend who I won't reveal their name for confidentiality reasons. My friend and I got really close when we were in Iraq. We were really good buddies. And we actually had broken some rules in the military that got us in trouble. And so we were like basically put on the military version of timeout for 30 days. Yeah. And we ended up becoming really good friends. And so we played Xbox together. We would like eat. He would always offer me Cool Ranch Doritos. We would listen to like 90s grunge music together. We were basically like, you know, quote, criminals that had like bonded and like became like buddies and like, you know, in the restriction phase. So we had stayed close. We had always been friends with each other. And, you know, as I was in the military and we were getting out, he had kind of gone towards this dark path where he started dabbling in nitrous and alcohol, and it was very abusing it big time. And when I talk about nitrous, I'm talking about buying computer duster from the local PX and like huffing it to the point where he would just make himself black out. Yeah. A couple of times when I was in the military, his heart stopped twice. And I remember watching people resuscitate him. Now imagine watching your friend go through that, and you feel helpless at this point because how are you going to save him? Well, there was one moment where I was on what they call barracks duty, which basically means that like there's always a 24-hour watching the barracks. So everybody in the Marine Corps has to do some form of military duty, stand post as they call it. So it was my turn. And it was a Saturday, and I was really pissed off about it too, because I was like, God, I work all week and I have to do like duty on a Saturday, a 12-hour shift. Like, this sucks. And so my friend, I see him walking out, and he says hi to me, and I say, you know, hey man, how you doing? He's like, good. We'll call him Jay at this point. Okay. So I say, hey Jay. So Jay walks by me and he's like, hey man, I'm going to go grab some beer. You want some? And I'm like, no, I'm good, dude. And in the back of my head, I'm like, you know, I'm watching this. I'm like kind of watching him. I'm like, dude, like you're going to the liquor store. Like I know you've been, you know, fucking around with nitrous, you know, but I guess I'm lost for words when I talk about like, what would I do in that situation? I don't know what I would have done. You know, like I was a young kid at that time. I just got back from war. Like I wanted to help him, but it was kind of like, I guess I was a little conflicted.
Sure.
I think we were all trying to help him. Our unit was trying to help him, but I think no matter what, there was still some residual impact and effect from whatever it was that he was dealing with. Anyway, he went down a really dark hole. And I saw Jay going out to his car, and the car started up, and, you know, he pulls out and he parks the car, and it's parked for a little bit. And I'm still watching over the window and over the windowsill in the barracks duty hut. And about a couple seconds later, he starts driving, and all of a sudden the car completely swerves and crashes into a bunch of the parked cars in the parking lot. And then the car slowly rolls into a tree. And I hear like all the crazy noises, right? And I get out of the duty hut and I go over and I see it's Jay in the car. And Jay is like completely like eyes closed, slouched over in his seat. And I'm like, holy shit, is he dead? Mm-hmm. And I see him wake up and start freaking out crying. And I look down at the bottom of like the floor mats, and there's nitrous cans down there. Oh. And I'm like, holy shit. Now, Chelly, I tell this story because I had to turn my friend in.
Yeah. Wow.
I had to turn my friend Jay in. And so I said, Jay, I can't help you. He's like, please, man, don't tell anybody. And I was like, Jay, I can't, dude. Like,
You're a danger to others. You're a danger to
I
yourself.
mean, it's also like my job. Like, I'm
Right.
on duty.
That's what you have to do.
So I did. And I remember like probably a couple months later, they wouldn't put him in rehab and like get him help. They kind of, what they do, an admin separation, and they kicked him out of the military. Now, we had stayed in touch through Facebook at the time, and like, you know, kind of, hey, how you doing? He's good. And he seemed everything was normal. A couple months after I had last talked to him, I hadn't heard anything, and I found out through a friend that he had committed suicide and hung himself in a Las Vegas hotel room. Oh, no. Drugs all around. When I heard that, I carried the weight, part of like my post-traumatic stress and some of the war trauma that I had, that was also integrated into all of that too, right? So dealing with a close friend of yours that had committed suicide after the military, after we had come home from war, 15 months in a war zone, and that happens. Well, fast forward back to the reading. So at this time, as I'm going through my transformation, so to speak, I end up having this reading with my aunt, and she says there's a gentleman in the room. And I said, okay. I don't see anybody. Like, it's just me, right? And I'm thinking gentleman as like there's a physical body here. And she's like, someone who knows you really well had just stepped into the room. And at that moment in time in my mind, I was like, holy shit, is it him? And I said, what's his name? And she said, his name begins with a J. And I was like, holy shit, it's him. It's my buddy. I never got to say goodbye to my friend. I never got to wish him well. The last thing that I ever really did to interact with him was to tell him that I would come visit him sometime in Vegas. Mm-hmm. But before that, the last time I had ever really truly interacted with him in the military was the day I had to turn him in.
Right.
So during the reading, my aunt tells me that I needed to listen and not ask anything because it was something that he wanted to share with her. And she told me that he loved me like a brother and that he's always watching over me and that he forgives me for what I had to do. And I was like, I kind of was a little skeptical, right? Like, forgive me for what? And she said, the day that he was in the car. And my aunt didn't know anything about this.
Right.
Like, I don't tell her this stuff, right? So, you know, when you talk about dealing with someone who's incredibly clairvoyant, super intuitive, a psychic, and you hear this stuff and you never said a freaking word to them, I was like taken aback by it. You know, and so for me, that was during my spiritual transformation and just kind of the awakening piece of that. When we talk about God and we talk about the other side and we talk about crossing over, like, I know in my heart of hearts that there is something out there that is way bigger than us, and I have tended to not try to explain it or try to find an explanation for it. And the second thing is that when our loved ones depart from us and when our friends leave us and we don't know why, just know that you physically can't see them, but they will always be in the room with you no matter what. And that to me was, I can just tell you to this day, when it comes to what my beliefs are, I know there's another side to the world we live in. And I know that my friends are always there and my grandparents are watching me and those who I've lost. And I also know that faith, hope, and trust is really the things that I really believe in terms of my spirituality and my practices.
And it's so powerful because you've taken these experiences and you've integrated them into how you show up in the world through your work, through your interests, through the relationships that you have with your friends and everyone around you. Can you talk a little bit about how that informs your storytelling and your book writing and having, first of all, this clear place to write from and to work from since you're no longer using substances, but also the transformative spiritual experiences that have been benchmarks in your life?
Yeah. So for the last 2.5 years, sobriety has really, truly impacted my life, and it's also impacted my work. I've been very grateful to have some amazing employers and some people that I've learned a lot of lessons from. And through all those experiences, in January, I started a content marketing firm called Live Your Truth Media. And the name came to me out of the fact that we are feeling more and more pressure in the world to try to get likes, clicks, and shares. And so many of us are caving into this pressure because we want to sell, we want to create monetization, we want to create business. But all of us also want to be of service, and we want to be authentic. We want to tell the real story. We want to help people. But it's become a division, right?
Yes.
Everybody is like, I want to help people and I want to reach and impact thousands of people. And I want to be, like Tony Robbins. And
But
like,
enough about me.
yeah. And like, no, I mean, no, but it's like everybody's trying to be these huge people, these big name people that are trying to impact millions of lives. And listen, we all deep down want to make the world a better place, but we're also sacrificing a lot of our own integrity and authenticity to achieve that. So we're copying and pasting social media ads. We're like doing what all the gurus do. We're sell, build these online businesses so then we can go and impact people. And I saw all of this and I said, why is everybody trying to chase the carrot? Why? Why do you need to go after and like achieve this quick, immediate impact and success? When if you're really, truly committed to your work, it's a 20-year vision. It's a 30-year vision. It's a life's work and purpose. After my spiritual awakening and going through all the challenges and the obstacles and the peaks and valleys of life, I came to one thing only. The secret was to just keep going. And I also had to trust in myself and in the entire fact that the God-given talents that I have as a writer, the God-given talents that I have in like storytelling and helping people had to be a lifelong commitment. This was not building a startup and exiting quickly and making a crap load of money so I can go chill on a beach in Bali with cocktails. This is not what that was about. Live Your Truth Media is bigger than me. My team, the people that work with me are all friends of mine or have become friends of mine, but they also know that this is bigger than us too. So from a services standpoint, we focus on everything to help create and tell your story out in the world. So it's tell your story and be who you want to be. Create your new way of being. Podcasting, online courses, social media strategy, blog writing. You want to write a book? Let's talk about what that process looks like. You want to do a podcast? Stop talking to us about monetization right off the bat. Otherwise, I'm going to tell you you're not ready. Your podcast, your content, your writing, all of that stuff has got to come from within. It's got to connect to the reason why that you're here. For me, yes, there are business objectives that we have to achieve. But at the flip side of things, it's about scaling impact of people and scaling impact of the individual that wants to help people. Because that to me is what this is really about. So I'm on like a personal mission to try to help people stop playing this game that everybody else is trying to play and chasing this carrot, and double down on who you are. Develop your own personality, develop your own brand. Then from there, talk about running Facebook ads, building digital products, building content. You can always scale your story. It's not about that. But if your story's not developed and it's not real, people see through that. People know what vanity looks like and people know what's fake. So why do it? Why chase all that stuff? Why not, out of any means necessary, just be yourself and build a company, build your product, your services, coaching businesses, whatever. Just build it around being you. So this model of integrity, this model of core values, this model of like, have fun doing this. This is a 20-year vision. We started in January. We've been able to work with some really great clients. And the best part is that there's no pressure. And it's really interesting to see that because in business, there's always pressure. Perform, more. And that's part of American culture too. That's just like how we're groomed and bred to be. Right?
Very true.
Right. And, for us, we say, listen, focus 6 months on developing the core identity of who you are. Because when I got out of the military, I didn't really know who I was. But it took me 10 years to figure out exactly who I was. And today I have such a good understanding of who I am, but I'm always continually trying to figure out who I am and who I want to be. So I take that 10-year journey that I was on and I shrink it down and I say, give yourself 6 months to develop something that, one, helps people, serves people, and also gives people the opportunity to improve, elevate, or change their life for the better. So our entire team is focused on that. And it's been really great to see. And that shapes my storytelling. I've removed a lot of the judgment that most of us feel when we post something online. Or are people going to click on it? Well, my friends think I'm some like wingbat, like some spiritual woo-woo crazy. I'm telling you.
Trust me, I worry about those things all the time.
Right. Mm-hmm. But the thing is this, is that, why does that matter? Is that not who you are? Yes. It's 100% who you are. And you know what? One person that may think you're out in left field eating peanuts, another person might think you are the coolest person that they've ever met in their life. Yes. Those are the people that matter.
Those are the people that matter, and every voice matters. You mentioned Tony Robbins. There are people who are going to resonate with the way he delivers information and the way he gets people motivated. And some people don't resonate with him at all and need someone like a Gabby Bernstein or Marie Forleo. You have to find the person that you resonate with the most. And so it might be a very similar message, but you don't hear it from this person and you hear it from this person. So the fact that you're given this gut hit to say these things, to be this person out in the world, to me, it's because you're supposed to. It's because you're meant to use your voice in that regard. So it's really wonderful to have you run a business by the very values and principles that you believe in, and you help others to do the same.
Yeah. And to me, I have learned so much about myself being an entrepreneur for the first time. And, there are things I'm still learning every single day. And what I do know is that the way that the world is going on social media, with the rise of fake news that's happened with the last couple of years, where people are being pulled in so many different directions with opinions and news broadcasts and people chasing like the hot button issues, we are all right now dealing with a huge, huge issue of trust.
Absolutely.
We do not know what to believe. It's happening in our spirituality. It's happening in our consumption of content and media. And we are all trying to figure out what the hell is real and what's not, what works and what doesn't. And so, for us, I'm not saying we have the end all be all solution, but I would say that our team is that the only way that you're ever going to get to the truth is to just be who you are. So start with that and build your company, build your brand, build your coaching services, build your book, all through just being yourself. There is a thing I heard a couple of years ago. It's one of my favorite things to share with people. And it's called like the rules of three, right? And people are broken into thirds. Some people, a third of people, I should say, will love you to the moon and back. Everything that you do will love your content, will love you as a person, think you are just like the coolest thing since color TV, right? And then there's another third of people that will absolutely cannot stand your ass. They think you're awful, you're annoying, your ticks and nuances just drive them crazy, right? And then there's a third of people that just have no opinion of you. Once I heard this, I started realizing that, okay, well, if that's the case, I should really truly focus on the third of people that actually really do care about me, because more than likely those are going to be the third of people that I really care about. So when I wrote my first book, Stories of Human Spirit and War, the people that I focused on was the people that were closest to me. And so I've been asked to rewrite that book for a kind of like probably like an 8-year like repub, so to speak, that's supposed to be coming out next year as well. And there's a lot of stuff I realized at that time that I left on the table, and it was solely because what I know now about being who you are and your story I didn't know back then as a young Marine out of the military, not having any clue of what I was going to do with my life, and writing this book from complete raw felt emotion. Now that I know what it is I truly believe and how I got in touch with myself, that book needs more love and it needs more truth to it. So I'm rewriting that book, and I'm really excited to re-release that because there's a lot of stuff I do want to share with people. Also, my second book that's coming out, War, How I've Missed You, it's the first time I've dabbled into fiction, and it's based on the realities and things that I learned from the military done in fiction form. And it's about a young private named Vincent Woods who is out of the military for the last 10 years. And he looks at his life now and writes a book that's reflecting back on the times that he had and the things that he missed. And it's called War, How I've Missed You, because if you ask a lot of military veterans that served, they will tell you that the war zone most of the time seems to be an easier place to live than it is in modern day society.
Wow. That's
And
intense.
and that book to me is something that I truly love. It's probably would say it's one of the best pieces of writing that I've ever done, mostly because it exemplifies that. There was a simplicity to it. There was camaraderie. You had friendships forged in the worst of times. Brotherhood and sisterhood were shaped in the form of shared misery. I would tell you the power of friendship being formed in the times when you're both are absolutely miserable. There's nothing like it in the world.
I can agree with that.
And so
when do people get to read this book?
So right now I think we're shooting for May 2020 for War, How I've Missed You. I would probably say for the Sandbox Story Spirits of War, like version 2 or edition 2 or second edition. I've said that 3 different ways.
2.0?
Yeah, 2.0. I would probably say looking at Veterans Day next year. So okay. November 11th. And I think to me, this is, for me in the writing wise, I think this is going to be 2020 is going to be a great year for me in terms of writing, because throughout my journey in life, I've learned so much about what it really truly takes to create a story and to share who you are online and not being afraid of judgments and opinions. And, what I've learned through my team at Live Your Truth Media and what I've learned from people and my clients that I've worked with, that has really helped shape and form and motivate me to start sharing my thoughts and writing online and to helping people and to spreading the word and trying to work with people that, are wanting to make that impact. And it's pushed me a little bit more. So yeah, I'm really excited about it. It's going to be great. And
you're making a tremendous impact, and just know
Trying
that
to.
You are. I mean, it's a fact, and the way you show up every day resonates and it ripples out, to the masses, bit by bit, person by person. You'd be surprised by how that one conversation or that one helping of someone getting that blog post out just changes the world. It does. It's in those small ways that add up.
And I would say that anybody out there who may be struggling with content marketing or strategy or trying to figure out how to get over the writer's block, right? I know you and I are both writers, and you deal with your fair share of writer's block. My advice to you is don't overthink it. Just don't. Writer's block really comes from the fact that you're overthinking something and you're trying too hard to make it work. I'll tell this in 2 different perspectives, a spiritual sense, and I'll tell this from a practical sense. So my spiritual advice is this: let go of the control that you're trying to have over the piece. Just let go of it. Just write from the lens of one person. If one person reads this, I am trying to help that one person. And if I write a piece that's going to make a difference to that one person, whether it's your mom, it's your dad, your best friend, if you have that in mind as you write that piece, the piece will be successful.
It's a great tip.
And listen, take the metrics out of it. Don't look at only 100 people read my blog post. Who really gives a shit? Who cares? Is the piece valuable? Did you try to help somebody? Don't try to make it I'm going to do this list post because this is what all the Facebook gurus are saying. Let it go. Just write it. So spiritual practice, surrender, let go of control, just write the piece. You will spend 90% of your life never doing all the things that you want to do if you just think you have to have control over the situation.
I know that's true.
Sometimes you just got to say, fuck it, and just do it, right?
Just do it.
1. Now, practical sense is this. When it comes to creating content, think about how you are going to help people on a day-to-day basis, a weekly basis, a monthly basis, and how are you going to provide them that value? I always share with people I'm working with. I've shared with my clients. I tell them, think about value, but don't think about value in the sense because everybody else is saying this. Think about if you're a coach and you really truly want to help people improve their life. You're a fitness coach, right? Let's use the example. You're a trainer who's going out and you're trying to help people lose weight, right? We all know January is coming up, right? Or would be January. And we know that everybody's like super motivated to lose those 15, 20 pounds to try to look like they did when they were 18. Like we all go through that stuff, right?
Again, stop talking about me.
Just stop. So we all go through that, right? And, you know, as a fitness coach, you shouldn't be looking at like, oh yeah, this is the month where everybody signs up for gym memberships. No one cares, right? Like take that out of the lens. Say, all right, I want to help somebody. I want to help somebody. What is the one tip that I can give them right now to get them moving? Maybe it's say, try going for a walk every 30 days for the next 30 days. Maybe it's eat less processed food and more vegetables and fruits. Little things like that. If you can just think about your content marketing and your strategy with just little pieces of content, and you don't ask for anything in return. I want everybody to try to do this for 60 to 90 days. Do not ask for anything in return, but show up every single day for the people that follow you and give them a piece of advice. And you will be shocked at how people interact with you, because what you're doing is that you are being you and you are providing service and you're being of service to people, right? So there might be a blog post that you're looking at right now and you're trying to, you know, going back to the blog post example that I had before. So from a spiritual sense, I tell you to just like fuck it and do it.
Just do it.
There's a practical sense from this too, is don't try to stuff everything with keywords, SEO, so that people will find your stuff. Just remove all of that and say, what is the purpose of this post? Why am I sharing this with people? So we call it intent-driven content marketing. Right? What is it that is motivating you right now to share this piece or write this piece? What is it right now that you are trying to do to help people get to a better space? Don't ask for anything in return. If you're truly of service, be of service. Do not ask to say, well, I'm going to help you out, but in return, you're going to like give me 2x of what I gave you. Stop trying to worry about what you're going to get out of it. If you're a coach, be a coach. Help people. If you're a team player, be a team player. Be the best damn team player you can be and elevate the level of the playing ability that your teammates have, right? That's from a practical sense. Don't remove your own inhibitions from it. Just be you, right? Help people. Don't worry about what you're going to get out of it. Just share it, post it, and then try it again and be of service.
Just like you're being of service right now. I hope you guys heard all that, took notes, because that is some gold.
Well,
right
you.
there. Yeah.
Yeah. And again, like this is a long game, everybody. This is not something that you should be thinking about like, oh, I'm going to do this for 6 months. I'm going to get a crap load of coaching leads. I'm going to book them. I'm going to make tons of money. And then I'm going to run Facebook ads and I'm going to turn to Marie Forleo or Gabby Bernstein or all those like, you know, Mel Robbins. You look at like Tony Robbins, you look at Lewis Howes, like all these big names. Stop trying to be them. They are them because that's who they wanted to be and that's what they created. You can see what they've done and emulate them to a point from their authenticity, but do not do what they are doing, because guess what? I'm going to use you for example, Charlie, because you're sitting right in front of me. Imagine if you started doing what Marie Forleo was doing. Who do you think I would think you were trying to be?
Marie.
Right. Not Chelly.
Right.
Correct? Exactly.
Chelly TV has a good ring to it.
Right. No, Chelly TV does have a good ring to it. But again, I'm going to think you're somebody else. I'm not going to think you're you. Right. So tactics and tools are great, but at the end of the day, people can see very well BS.
For sure.
So just be you. Right.
You're the best you that there is. There's no one who can do it better. So do you have a website? And we can put this in the show notes as well, but what would be the best way for people to get a hold of you?
Yeah, sure. So if you're looking for help or seeking advice from, you know, for your brand, for your company, for your book, you can reach out to us at liveyourtruth.media. Your website should be done relatively soon. We're more than happy to sit down and talk to you. And, you know, we want to make things work for you, right? So we're here to be of service. We're trying to figure out ways that make sense for you to really help your audience, really build engagement and retain your fan base. If you're looking for someone who just have personal questions about, or you just have questions in general about your brand, like please feel free to like go visit our website, sign up for a newsletter. You can drop us an email in there as well. And somebody from my team, more than likely me, we'll get back to you. If you are interested in talking more about the spirituality of war, books, anything like that in my writing, you can go to MikeLiguori.com. That's MikeLiguori.com. And I got a blog on there, and really that whole entire website is just about value. Like I just try to help people. And so a lot of my posts on there are about daily thoughts, weekly thoughts I've had. There was a period where I stopped writing it. And I'm not going to lie to you. It was mostly because I was building a company. And then I was like, holy shit, I have a blog. I should probably go back to it.
Well, I will accept that excuse.
Yeah,
it's fair.
Of course.
It's fair. We can all take time.
But I'm just here to help, and I'm here to help, and I'm more than happy to guide you guys in whatever way I can. And if I'm not able to help you, there's people I know that might be a better service to you. My team is really great. I have friends in my network. So just feel free. You can also connect with me on LinkedIn as well. I'm more than happy to help you out there.
That's fantastic. Well, Mike, I wanted to thank you for sharing your heart and being so vulnerable today,
honor.
Because I truly believe when people go deep and tell their truths, countless others heal. So it's really important that you shared what you did today. So thank you for being on the show.
Thank you for having me. And it was really great. I'm really glad I got to do this with you today, and hopefully we'll get to do it again soon.
Sounds good. Thank you. Thank you for listening to Lighthouse Conversations. If this show resonates with you, it would mean so much to have you rate, review, and share. Don't forget to follow us at chellycanales.com and on social media.